Quote, he yells, unquote, said one MP. He punches down at Caucus all the time. If you don't agree with our agenda, I don't want to hear it. If you have criticism, keep them for yourself.
What's the Prime Minister going to tell her if he cares enough to stand up and answer?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish the Chief of the Opposition, Leader of the Opposition, a happy birthday. I hope his day improves.
This is not a joke. This is a woman's life.
Mark Carney came into office promising competence, discipline, and a new kind of leadership. But the more his own caucus speaks, the more that image starts to crack. From reports that he refuses feedback outside his inner circle, to allegations that he lashes out and yells at Liberal MPs, to a caucus that voted against giving itself the power to hold him accountable, a very different picture is emerging. And after back-to-back weeks where things have gone from bad to worse, it may only be a matter of time before the thin-skinned banker finally snaps. Let's take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the latest piece from Althea Raj, and this is from the Toronto Star, if you can believe it. He yells Mark Carney's focus has Liberal MPs bristling. Perhaps we'll soon call it Mark Carney's democratic deficit. The Prime Minister has a penchant for centralizing power, one explored a few times in this column, and now the edict to his Liberal MPs is that he does not want to be challenged. Over the course of several caucus meetings now, Grit MPs, Grit as some people may know is a slang term for Liberals, report Carney lashing out at certain members when he doesn't like the message they deliver. They include Nova Scotia MP Jamie Battiste, a Mi'kmaq from Cape Breton, raising concerns over negative perceptions of the government's changes to the Indian Act and receiving a stunning rebuke. Winnipeg MP Doug Ailson, a physician, being told not to come to the Prime Minister with concerns over the lack of federal response to Alberta's two-tiered healthcare Bill 11, and Laval MP Angelo Iacano, who wanted the Prime Minister to visit his riding and was met with Carney insisting he'd been to Laval recently, though he had not. The experiences have left a lasting imprint on several MPs. Quote, he yells, unquote, said one MP. Like others, spoke on condition of anonymity to avoid retribution from the Prime Minister's office. Quote, he punches down at Caucus all the time, end quote. Carney has told his caucus members he doesn't want to hear their concerns, he wants solutions. While it's a message that resonates with some, hearing complaints can be useful. It's an early warning system for the government that certain policies or bills are not properly understood and that the message needs to be tweaked or the legislation amended to address legitimate and unforeseen criticism. Last week, some MPs felt the Prime Minister's message was that he's not interested in what they have to say. Carney was making the case that the government is focused on national unity, on the Kuzma talks, on growing the economy. It has a plan, and message discipline is key. Quote, if you don't agree with our agenda, I don't want to hear it. If you have criticism, keep them for yourself, end quote, was the way another MP portrayed it. This week, Caucus Chair James Maloney told Liberal MPs not to talk to journalists. He also told them not to write to the Prime Minister with their concerns because their letters could leak. While Carney's desire to stop caucus leaks is not unprecedented, Justin Trudeau's Chief of Staff Katie Telford also urged caucus members not to speak to specific journalists. Some MPs feel it is more extreme than what they're accustomed to. It is, perhaps, another reminder that the early ambition of the Trudeau days are really over. Back then, the Prime Minister wrote cabinet ministers mandate letters urging them to engage with journalists, to constructively dialogue with stakeholders, to set a higher bar for openness and transparency. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we've been saying for a while now, the CEO, the banker, the executive is now making his presence known, and people in the Liberal caucus are finally understanding who the real Mark Carney is. Now, this is on top of all of the issues that have been coming out as of late, or maybe it's kind of the result of them. Because you've had all of these cracks starting to form over the last 6 to 8 months. We've covered just about all of them. We've covered the Jewish cracks that have been forming within the Liberal caucus, the letter that was sent to the caucus to try to get a lot of support just to say that anti-Semitism is a bad thing. Meanwhile, 80% of caucus refused to sign it. And then on the other side, you have the climate folks, the environmentalists that are used to getting their way and are used to subjugating the Canadian population just to be able to say, well, we're saving the environment. But now you actually have people coming out and naming what Mark Carney is doing, who he's doing it to. And this is a stark difference from what was happening over the last year, where there was reports of this, but there wasn't a lot of detail that came out of it. And this is a leader that's only been there for about a year, and he's only been in politics for about a year. You didn't have this kind of criticism with Justin Trudeau until very late in the game, after he'd been in government for around 10 years. But we want it to be fair, folks. We want to be fair, but we also want to show you that this is a pattern. And the fairness that we're talking about is that we're going to show you some other articles over the last year or so, but they're not from this particular journalist in the Toronto Star. Because if we showed you a bunch of articles from the same person, you could say, well, that's the journalist bias and that's their style, and that would be fair. But we want to be fair on Northern Perspective, and we want to show you that it's not just from one journalist, and it's not just from one publication outlet. So this is from iPolitics, folks, and this was from back on December 2nd, 2025. So almost 6 months ago. They just don't get it. Some Trudeau-era Liberal MPs struggling to adjust to Carney's leadership, say sources. In the wake of Stephen Guilbeault's leaving cabinet, a senior government source told iPolitics that several other Trudeau-era Liberal MPs are also having challenges, quote-unquote, coming to grips to the new direction laid out by Prime Minister Mark Carney. The source, who requested anonymity because they're not authorized to publicly speak on the matter, said many, like Guilbeault, are concerned about the government's shift in approach on climate issues, including laying out a path for a new oil pipeline to the west coast in an agreement with Alberta reached last week. Gee, could this have been forecasting something that we just covered in the last couple of weeks? They warned that this view was increasingly out of touch with the majority of Canadians, who are increasingly prioritizing speeding up construction of major projects and efforts to diversify the country's trading partners. So this is significant, folks, because this is not some disgruntled MPs running to the press and complaining about Mark Carney. This is actually the opposite of that, where you have other MPs running to the press complaining about other Liberal MP caucus members that aren't adjusting to Mark Carney. So you might be able to take it with a grain of salt when one or two MPs go to the media and they say, oh, there's a bunch of us and we're not happy and Mark Carney is acting like a tyrant and he's not listening to anybody. You can take that with a grain of salt. But when you have the flip side happening and you have people that are saying, no, there's a bunch of MPs and they don't get it and they're out of touch and they're not happy with Mark Carney's leadership, and they're almost criticizing them, that's a completely different perspective. And this adds a completely different type of credibility to what is actually going on behind closed doors in Mark Carney's Liberal caucus. Quote, they're still stuck in that Trudeau era of the view of the world, which would have garnered us maybe 15 to 20 seats across the country, and they just can't handle that, end quote, the source said, referring to Justin Trudeau's cratering approval ratings near the end of his term. Quote, they just don't get it. The world has changed completely, end quote. Former Trudeau cabinet minister Karina Gold was one of several Liberal MPs who sought clarity from Foreign Affairs Anita Anand at a recent Liberal caucus meeting about Carney's comments at the G20 that Canada was no longer pursuing a feminist foreign policy, Liberal sources told iPolitics. The questioning centered on whether or not the Liberals were committed to continue championing policies and projects that advance gender equity across the globe. Another Liberal source, who requested anonymity to speak freely, said Carney represented a quote-unquote striking break in approach from Trudeau, putting more stock in taking action than seeking out consensus or consulting with others outside his inner circle. The source added that Carney seems unbothered by criticism from within the Liberal caucus because of his popularity with Canadians and feels, quote-unquote, very confident that he would defeat Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in a rematch. But that's not to say there's no risk to his governing style. The source warned that Carney will need to rely on his team at some point, and there may be some members who he won't be able to win back. quote, "You just can't alienate your caucus and expect there not to be a consequence. They won't forget being treated this way," end quote. So this was back in December. This was from a completely different publication source, as we said, iPolitics, and you have a very different array of views that are coming into play in this reporting. So you have some people that are criticizing the Trudeau era MPs and recognizing that there's a bunch of them that are really not happy. And then you have other people that are saying he's alienating his caucus, he doesn't listen to anybody, and he seems to think that he's the only guy keeping this ship afloat. Now here's the problem. He may actually be right. He may be right that he is the only person keeping this ship afloat, because as long as Mark Carney's approval ratings are high, the Liberal caucus approval ratings may remain high. And this is a very precarious position to actually be in. As we saw with Justin Trudeau, it's not a matter of the Liberal brand carrying the party itself and carrying the people around it. It's the man and the leader that is actually carrying the brand itself. So when the Liberal brand started to tank because Justin Trudeau's credibility fell through the floor, this is the problem, right? Now, people will complain about Pierre Poilievre's personal numbers all they want, but this is the drastic difference between the Liberals and the Conservatives. The Conservatives, they rely on policy, and they rely on their messaging, and they rely on how their approach is going to be utilized in order to bring Canada back from this ridiculous situation that we're in. And people can say what they want about Pierre Poilievre's personal numbers. Those people that are saying that he doesn't have great personal numbers or voting that haven't really gotten to know the guy. But despite that, the Conservatives are still relatively close to the Liberals. So that means that the party brand is actually doing the heavy lifting, and that's what you want. But when you have a party whose whole brand and the whole approval is tied to just one guy, what happens when the public sours on that one guy? The party has no brand to actually keep him afloat. And as that person's personal approval numbers go down, it takes the entire party approval numbers with him. And this is going to be the challenge as we continue through these articles. So we're going back a bit further. This is in October of 2025, and this was actually published in Maclean's. Mark Carney is a very demanding boss. Carney, a one-time Goldman Sachs executive and former governor for both the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, had won the race in a landslide despite having zero political experience. And this is obviously referring to the Liberal leadership race. The evening of his victory, he gathered with jubilant advisors for a victory party in a back room. There, they got a text from a staffer for Karina Gold, the 38-year-old MP from Burlington, Ontario, who'd run against Carney for the party leadership. Gold had made a few mild pokes at Carney during the campaign. In one debate, she took a jab at his reputation as a fiscally focused technocrat. Quote, "You can't bring a calculator to a knife fight," end quote, she said, referring to the trade war with the US. The attacks were genteel compared to most political mudslinging, and Liberals warmed to her during the campaign. They embraced her as both a cherished member of the Liberal family and, increasingly, the standard bearer for its left flank. But her needling got under Carney's skin, even though he was the frontrunner. She ultimately received only 3% of the vote. He and his staff made their irritation plain. One member of Gold's team told me that many of them were aggressive in their vitriol toward her. When someone from Gold's team texted to ask if she could stop by and congratulate the winner, Carney said no. In fact, according to one source I spoke with, he said he didn't ever want to see her again. Carney's staff sent Gold a non-committal answer, trying not to offend her, but she showed up anyway. That led to a brief, awkward meeting with Carney. The incident rattled some of the people around the newly elected leader. Many had worked under Justin Trudeau, who, after a lifetime in politics, had skin like a crocodile. Carney, after years of being celebrated, venerated, and treated with the deference accorded to a titan of the financial world, seems to have a skin like a peach. A week later, Carney lost his temper again at a press conference in London that marked one of the lowlights of his campaign for Prime Minister. When reporters pressed him about potential conflicts of interest stemming from his massive investment portfolio, he sounded exasperated, pointing out that he'd already put the assets into a blind trust. When CBC's Rosemary Barton followed up, he blinked in annoyance. Quote, "Look inside yourself, Rosemary," end quote, he said. Quote, "I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country," end quote. Carney reacted like someone accustomed to ending disputes in boardrooms and corner offices with a quick "case closed." But that isn't how news conferences work. His emotional response drew attention to an issue he'd hoped to pass over quickly, and it exposed his short fuse. In May of last year, Carney moved into Rideau Cottage and swore in his cabinet. From the start, he made it plain that things would be different, beginning with the dress code. He wanted people to be punctual and dressed as they would in a bank, with black shoes for the men. He told even the most senior public servants that their days of coming to the office in open-necked shirts and blazers were over. Carney is said to be demanding and short-tempered with those who brief him, creating a much tenser atmosphere than existed under Trudeau, who ran the office like an encouraging teacher. On May 26th, the day of his first speech in the House of Commons, Industry Minister Mélanie Joly, whose support was crucial to Carney's leadership victory, approached him to speak in the House of Commons while he was going over notes. A video shows him casually waving her off, dismissing her as an irritant without even raising his head. This kind of imperious behavior is the norm in Carney's PMO. Quote, "I know of countless staff, including myself, to whom he has done that," end quote, says one veteran staffer who is worried about the way he is running the office. It's taking them a long time to staff up. There is uncertainty about roles, and normal consultative processes are being short-circuited. Carney is also casually contemptuous of the Trudeau government, which is awkward since he is now presiding over the machine Trudeau built. And he is not humble. Quote, "I can say with confidence that he believes that he is always the smartest person in the room," end quote, said the same staffer. Quote, "and that he feels that there's little value to derive from any voices around him," end quote. Some MPs have formed a quote-unquote climate caucus to make sure their issues are heard, though, for now, they are not openly criticizing Carney himself. Quote, "At some point, there's going to be the straw that broke the camel's back," end quote, says Supriya Dwivedi, a former senior advisor to Trudeau. Quote, "You're just going to have a lot of the discontent gushing out at once," end quote. So it's interesting, the further back we go, the more foreshadowing that we get of what has come to pass. And that just, I think, goes to show the quality of the reporting that was actually going on in some of these pieces, but also that these weren't just rumors and these weren't just people that were making up stories, because we're starting to see that and starting to feel all of this play out right in front of us. You have Guilbeault coming out, and he's confirming to everybody that, yeah, there's a bunch of other people that are not happy about this, and they feel the exact same way as I do. So what is Carney going to do here? Well, this is the issue that he's going to have, because he doesn't like consulting with everybody. He doesn't like checking in with his caucus and his team, and that shows that he is not a people manager at all. He's a money manager, and that's a very different skill set. In politics, you need to be able to be checking in with your team. In people management, we call it, actually, ironically, we call it investing in your team. And you're investing your time to make sure that A, your team feels heard, B, they feel active, and C, they feel like they're a part of the machine that's actually carrying what you're trying to achieve moving forward. If you don't check in, if you don't listen to them, and if you don't make them feel that they're a part of that cog in the machine, then they feel completely alienated. And then you risk a whole different problem. In the private sector, you risk low-performing individuals, you risk jadedness, and you actually risk them impacting your bottom line. In politics, it's very different, because these people technically don't report to Mark Carney. They kind of do because he's the leader, but they don't in the fact that Mark Carney can't fire them. Their constituents are their boss, and this is what Mark Carney doesn't seem to understand. And we've been saying that he is operating like a CEO this entire time. And this pattern of these completely separate publications reporting very similar aspects and very similar experiences that are being felt inside the hidden doors of the Liberal caucus are confirming that. So as Mark Carney has these bad weeks, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because at some point he's going to have to turn to his team and say, okay, now maybe I'll listen to you, or maybe not. And the people that he's already alienated because he's yelled at them, he's ignored them, and he's just sloughed them off, they may say, no, you got this. You're on your own. You're the banker. Don't you remember? But the other problem that the Liberal caucus has is a massive one. Even after the Justin Trudeau experience, Liberal MPs still reject Reform Act rules. Prime Minister Mark Carney rallied his Liberal caucus Sunday afternoon with a speech that laid out his governing agenda for the reopening of Parliament. This was published on May 26, 2025. So, even after the Liberal Party had this problem with Justin Trudeau, where they needed him to go and Justin Trudeau refused to do so until it was too late, they decided, oh, don't worry, Mark Carney will be different. When in fact, what they've begun to see is that Mark Carney is far worse. So at least Justin Trudeau was this touchy-feely kind of guy. Mark Carney is not that. He's prickly. He's thin-skinned. He's quick to blow his fuse. And we're starting to see that manifest even more when it comes to the media. What happens when things continue not to go Mark Carney's way, and he continues to be challenged on this? There was one point from one of the articles that I found very salient, which was he tries to end questions as he would in a boardroom, saying, discussion is over. And we've seen him do that. He said, point final, or this is the end of it, or moving on. But you don't get to decide what the reporters actually ask Mr. Carney. And the more you actually alienate the reporters, the more they are actually going to challenge you. So this friendly mainstream media is becoming not so friendly anymore, especially at the press conferences. You're going to instead transition the story from what you're trying to announce and gaslight to Canadians to how you're actually announcing it. So the story doesn't become the announcement, it becomes your reaction to tough questions. And speaking of his reaction, check this out that happened in question period yesterday. You may have already seen it, but it's worth seeing again.
My question for the Prime Minister is about the human cost of Canada being the only G20 country in the recession. Zara from Toronto lost her administrative job at a real estate business. She can't find a new job and now has to sleep on a friend's couch. What's the Prime Minister going to tell her if he cares enough to stand up and answer? Is he going to tell her that she's just technically homeless and technically jobless?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish the Chief of the Opposition, Leader of the Opposition, a happy birthday. I hope his day improves. The government is focused on building a stronger economy. We recognize the scale of the challenges that this country is facing from abroad. We are focused on that administrator. We are focused on farmers in Battle River Crowfoot. We are focused on a future that is stronger, durable, more independent, more resilient, more sustainable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This is not a joke. This is a woman's life. This Prime Minister gave us the only recession in the G20, and he stands up and starts joking about her state of affairs. She's sleeping on someone's couch, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister stop being so flippant about the suffering that he's caused in the lives of Canadians and tell Zara, is her homelessness and joblessness just a technicality?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Family.
So, I didn't cut any of that And I know there's some spots I probably would have normally cut to speed up the video, but I wanted to ensure that you saw that this is what happened. This is what happened. No cuts, no editing, no nothing. That's what happened. And Carney didn't speak for the rest of the question period. He left and basically sat in his seat, and that was it. And Poilievre spoke for about 40 minutes, taking question after question after question in question period before turning it over to his caucus. This is Mark Carney, folks. I don't have to stand up and be accountable to anybody. He has one of the worst attendance records in question period. And this is what people are warning of. They're warning about it in the media, and they're warning about it behind the scenes in his caucus and how he reacts to this stuff. And now that we know that Mark Carney's skin is extremely thin, like a peach, as one of those articles said, this opens him up to exactly the type of attacks that Pierre Poilievre is phenomenally good at. So, Mr. Carney, you don't listen to anybody. You only listen to yourself. You yell at anybody who challenges you. You laugh at homeless Canadians. And you don't feel it's your job to show up for work. Your job is to fly around the world, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on luxury butter and luxury meals. Meanwhile, Canadians are having to skip meals. Sooner or later, the brand, Canadians are going to see exactly who you are. And at that point, that is when the house of cards of the Liberals is going to fall, because there is no brand around the Liberal Party that will keep you from sinking.